I'll share my screen first. So this session is actually, I did not mention the chapter name because this covers a chapter which is very interesting because it's not necessarily technical. It's a very human subject. But all of us every day realize that something is off about most people in terms of understanding reality. So Bitcoin is a good lens to understand reality because it's a skin in the game subject. If you buy Bitcoin, you are naturally incentivized to understand it better. So anybody who is into Bitcoin, who buys Bitcoin, who studies Bitcoin, will be able to see the reality of how we live as humans, as society better. And this chapter covers that. So it's not a very technical subject. It's not also very philosophical. It's more to do with political ideas, but also not how most people think of left versus right. It's mostly about how people fall into the trap of collectivist ideas and how Bitcoin is the antidote to that. And this is the first time that we even have that option to put up a resistance against such ideas. And if you remember, if you were there in the last session, that um, Bitcoin does not talk about any political ideas as such, but it allows us to bypass the clown world, as this chapter will talks about, as this chapter will talk about. So you do not need to have any political inclination. You just need to understand how money works, which is a neutral subject. Austin economics has nothing to do with politics as such. Yeah. So I'll take a pause here. I'll just check. Yeah, Dhruv will also join. Hi, Dhruv. Thanks for joining. I was just giving introduction to the chapter that we're about to start, and we'll start reading. And as always, feel free to ask questions and give your own thoughts. And yeah, if you have any pressing questions or ruminations, this session is supposed to add value to you in terms of sharing that with the rest of the group. So we'll start now. Clown world. Ask anyone what the most pressing political issue in the world is today, and you'll get a wildly different answer depending on who you ask. Climate change, nuclear threats, misinformation, censorship, corporate greed. The responsible will run the gamut. But drill down and you'll find a common thread underlying these problems, something most people miss entirely: the urge for there to be a free lunch. From individuals to nations, we share an innate desire to reap rewards without paying the costs. Until we shed this delusion and accept that every action has consequences, we'll remain trapped in a perpetual cycle of new crises, spawning from the attempts to solve old ones. So, free lunch is a very popular meme in Bitcoin. I'm sure all of you must have seen it on Twitter and other spaces as well. And you'll observe that whenever somebody talks about wealth distribution or income tax or why we need um, we need interventionist policies, you'll always see that there is some on a very layman friendly language, there is some relation to free lunch that we need to provide for somebody as if they are not able to provide for themselves. And how I put it to most people is that there is not untrue that some people need other people's support, but that's a very minority in terms of human population, and private charities can take care of that. We don't need to provide them as a society. It's not that all humans need to provide for the lesser. It's up to them whether they want to provide or not. And what that does is that it forces people to act in a certain way, and it allows for coercion and theft to be legitimized. So if you've been following this book or just observing Bitcoin and the wider reality, you'll know that most people, it's not that they are not technically competent or interested in understanding Bitcoin. It's that they fundamentally think that we need intervention. We need policies which um, which violate our freedoms and our property rights. Robert Heinlein's famous adage, "There is no such thing as a free lunch," encapsulates a fundamental economic principle that nothing is ever given away for free without a cost somewhere to someone. The phrase highlights that even if something appears to be free, costs are always involved, though they might be hidden or distributed in ways that are not immediately apparent. The concept is grounded in the understanding that resources are limited, and any goods or services provided for free must still be produced and delivered. The stereotypical free lunch is that you'll have your meal paid for, but only if you agree to watch this short sales presentation or sign up the free first week of this fantastic subscription. Yep. So we study economics, we bother to put work only because resources are limited. Yep. So if you observe any child, they are usually not concerned with the resources a lot because they are taken care of because somebody else is providing them resources. But as we grow up, as humans realize that resources are limited, it does not have to be an adult. Even a child realizes that pretty soon, that resources are limited, and we naturally now want to compete for those resources. And there are different strategies that even kids employ. Some of them include violence, and it's quickly realized that that's not how we are cooperating. That's not how humans cooperate the best. So any economic principles comes from this truth that resources are limited. Any study of economics, anything to do with money, comes with this realization. So nothing comes for free when you realize that. So oxygen is the most valuable resource that we consume, but we don't pay any price for that because there is more supply of oxygen than there is demand. But whenever there is a resource for which there are limited availability, uh, it does not come for free. So anybody who's offering you something for free is actually expecting you to pay something in cost, or expecting someone else to pay the cost for you. So this is where I think critical thinking starts to come into play, that most people fall victim to this. And there are many examples for this. I'll just quote one example that everybody realizes the problem with socialism or top down control, but most people don't realize the primitives that lead to that. It's not that someday somebody comes up and says, hey, I will control all of you. It happens because over time there are incentives which work in the short run, and they are provided to people who fall victim to them, whether that's free lunch, whether that's free subscription, whether that's just some welfare scheme that at least intends to be beneficial, but it only works in the short run. And one example that I think this is a technical audience, so I'll just try to understand. I've been trying to wrap my head around how Ocean proposes a solution to uh, block template control. So currently, there are only a couple of mining pools which combined control more than 50% hash rate. And what that allows them is to control the block template. And so that introduces the problem of censorship. So they cannot change the rules of Bitcoin because it's enforced by nodes, but they can censor certain transactions. And the game theory of Bitcoin mining is that any individual can use some other miner if some miner denies to include their transaction. That's the principle. That's the assumption that you will be able to have enough miners that they will include your transaction, because there's enough incentive to include your transaction if you pay the requisite transaction fee. But because there is so much centralization in one jurisdiction in the US, we are seeing that censorship is a real possibility, even though it's not happening at a scale where it is becoming a problem, but it is a possibility. And Ocean is introducing back, honestly, it's not like this is a new idea, but introducing back interaction with the blockchain directly, instead of paying some fixed salaries to miners. And what that does is that it introduces risk, introduces variance, but it rewards efficiency. And over time, that will eventually play out better compared to how Antpool and Foundry does it. What they do is that they provide salaries to miners regardless of whether they find the block or not. And to be able to keep that sustainable, they need to keep a huge buffer. They need to either have big VCs keep investing in them, or they need to take the risk that they will be able to make this sustainable even if they do not find blocks. And this convolutes the entire incentive mechanism of Bitcoin, because it either introduces more regulation, more VC funding, more money printing, or it creates a problem for the mining pool, Foundry and Pool, to keep this sustainable. So it's like the option now, the choice now becomes clear. Either we reward efficiency and we stick to the incentive mechanism that is baked into Bitcoin without having regulations intervene and tell miners what to do, or we just allow mining to be more centralized. So that's the choice, and the solution is actually not technical. It's not baked into Bitcoin. It's people making those choices to not allow mining to be more centralized, because there's no technical solution to that. If somebody is able to capture 70% of the hash rate, that's a reality. That's not something that we can code our way out of. I'll continue reading. I'll just take one short pause in case somebody has. I covered a few subjects, but these are not necessarily the point of understanding um, the lesson of this lesson, but yeah, just sharing my learnings and readings. Chances are high that if you're reading this, you live in what people commonly refer to as liberal democracy. Most people believe that liberal democracies spring from the ideas of liberalism and the will of the people. But is there any empirical evidence to support these claims? Furthermore, what do we mean by democracy and who are we referring to when we talk about the will of the people? So it was perhaps only yesterday that I really realized through a conversation with a friend that the left that we see being criticized in the mainstream politics right now, if you are on Bitcoin Twitter, you'll realize that the left is hated. And the original idea of left versus right was actually that left advocated for natural rights, for property rights, and for productivity to be the pillar in the economy. But over time, it has been completely diluted and captured. And so liberal ideas have always been the core principle of the non-aggression principle. And the non-aggression principle is a very simple idea that you don't aggress on me. That's like the only human right. This book puts it is the right to be left alone. And when humans are left alone, they will naturally interact with people who add value to them. And through those natural and free market interactions, we come up with a better cooperation strategy than violence. So liberal ideas are at the core of Bitcoin, are at the core of Austrian economics, at the core of human freedom. And most people think that they live in liberal democracies. I wouldn't go too much into problems with democracy. I am not an expert on political science enough to be able to comment on how democracies are. But yeah, I think just through empirical reality, we know that we are definitely not living in a liberal world because there is a monopoly of money printing that is legitimized, and we don't have a say over it. We don't have a say over choosing um, choosing to dissolve that institution. So democracy is definitely not working, if not uh, principally flawed. I don't think I have an expertise to say that democracy is principally flawed, but I can say that it is currently not working. And so I was also having this conversation about El Salvador and Argentina, that both of them are democracies. So both of them do have relevant examples of how Bitcoin can be used in states where there are democracies. So it's not as if Bitcoin and democracy are antithetical to each other. And that's a big debate because some people are critical of Javier Milei and El Salvador, Bukele as well. But yeah, so this is where, yeah, this is a much larger debate that I'll not cover too much. But yeah, I'll just read this passage again quickly and then we'll continue reading. Chances are you have read this before. We live in what people commonly refer to as a liberal democracy. Most people believe that liberal democracies spring from the ideas of liberalism and the will of people. But is there any empirical evidence to support these claims? Further, what do we mean by democracy? And who are we referring to when we talk about the will of the people? When was the last time you heard anyone say, "Oh, how I love to move to a country with more inflationary currency where I can pay higher taxes"? Or, "What I really like is to get less for more"? If given a choice, most people would like to pay lower taxes. If some think others should pay more taxes, but for some reason they never believe they should. Still, almost everyone fails to see the inherent flaws in this argument. All liberal democracies trend towards higher tax burdens and more inflation if you zoom out a few decades. Political scientists blame this phenomena on several factors, but the underlying cause is often overlooked. Yeah. So this is like the obvious thing that most people are always criticizing, that government should tax billionaires more. They never say that I want to pay more tax, because you always have the option to pay for the needy, for more infrastructure. But the core tenet of the problem um, with the current policy making, or the current social and cultural fabric, honestly, when you talk to people and their opinions on how money should work, they want more taxation. That's the And they never say that I want to pay more taxes. They always say that the other group should be taxed. And I yeah, so I think it's also just obvious that all countries have inflationary currencies. Bitcoin is not fighting some specific government; it's fighting the idea of inflation itself, or the idea of monopoly over control on money. But yeah, so I'm not, like I said before, I have not dwelled deep into the history of democracies. But as this says, that as this passage says, all liberal democracies trend towards higher tax burdens and more inflation. If you zoom out a few decades, political scientists blame this phenomenon on several factors, but the underlying cause is often overlooked. Let's explore some basic praxeological facts. Before a 100% consensual and voluntary transaction between two people occurs, both parties must necessarily value whatever the other party offers more than whatever they are willing to exchange for it. If this isn't the case, the trade won't happen. Conversely, if a transaction is non consensual and involuntary, the trade must occur at the expense of the party being forced to give something up. In other words, consensual transactions are a net benefit to all participants, while non consensual ones only benefit one party and punish the other. These statements are all true a priori, meaning empirical observations cannot confirm nor deny their validity. I'll break this down a bit. It's a bit technical. If you understand praxeology, you'll see that it's a science of understanding human action. So it's technical from that lens that we're understanding the basic principles and tenets of praxeology. But I'll first break it down on a very simple level that everybody every day realizes the importance of consent. You can observe this every day. It's like every moment of our lives, all of us value consent. So most people understand this that if I'm respected, if I engage in something consensually, then there is more value to be had. Nobody likes to be forced to anything. So everybody knows this. It's not a science. It's a human common sense or common experience. It's an experience that everybody knows at every level of society. But how it gets convoluted when you realize that control over money, when it comes to control over how money should be used, most people forget this idea that it's not consensual because we don't consent to inflation, we don't consent to taxes, we don't have an option to not pay them or to move to jurisdictions where there are lower taxes because there isn't one. So it gets into the idea of why most people are not able to think it through. But I think put put our put articulately, most people realize that um, any voluntary interaction is just a better way to cooperate. Yep. It is also important to stress that all human interactions are transactions. If two people merely talk, they exchange value with each other. And if governments could tax conversations, they certainly would. Conversants would remain silent if they didn't believe that allocating bodily energy to their vocal cords and producing sounds to form words for the other person to hear was worth it. Everything has a trade off and everything is a trade. You even trade with yourself if you forego immediate pleasure for consumption on a rainy day. Yeah, just reiterating on this fact that I was just giving an example to someone yesterday that Bitcoin transactions are just electromagnetic signals recorded on your computer. It's just a sound or it's just a vibration that we use when we make a transaction to record something. That's it's a written word on our machines. So government does tax conversation. It does tax those recorded conversations because government does attempt to tax Bitcoin. So it's a reality as we speak. And yeah, and the second point of this paragraph was that everything in life we do is coming at a trade-off because we are always investing energy into certain actions which we are doing at the cost of foregoing something else. If all transactions were utterly devoid of interventionism and coercion, everyone would stand to gain something from every interaction with another human being. Therefore, society should, above all else, strive to remove as many non-consensual interactions between people as possible. So why isn't this the primary concern of all governments? Because governments are in society. Society is you and me. Once you understand what this implies, you'll begin seeing the world through a different lens. Yeah. Yes, so this is the most powerful idea that anybody, once they realize that Bitcoin is permissionless, comes to that it's not that you need somebody to tell you to use Bitcoin, you just can start using it. And you realize that human interactions are made of just human beings, you, me, your friend, your parents, your families, your neighborhood, etc. So it does not require you to have a top down authority telling you what to do. And yeah, that's the realization that most people, of course, need their time with, but eventually realize um, when yeah, different things happen. So one is like Bitcoin cycle. So most people come in to Bitcoin for NGU, which is like a very human thing to do because you get more attention, you get more curious about something that is making the news, that is making someone else rich. So you are curious about what made them rich. So you realize that you do that because of humans, because your best friend tells you about Bitcoin, because you saw your neighbor getting rich off Bitcoin. And yeah, nobody needs to tell you about Bitcoin at that point. So it's not some top down authority that legitimizes Bitcoin. It's just the reality of how humans and how economic principles work. Theoretically, democratic elections should mitigate the risk of taxes running amok. I'll just read this again. Theoretically, democratic elections should mitigate the risk of taxes running amok. If the taxes become too burdensome for people, they will vote for parties that want to decrease them, right? So, why doesn't this ever happen? Why are virtually all democratic governments growing in size and intrusiveness? To understand this question, we must first understand how incentives dictate people's lives. I'll take a pause here because I think I alluded to this before that I come from a background where democracy was considered the pillar of society, the first principle of how we work. Because if you observe any criticism on any societal principle or any economic policy, you'll always hear the argument that this is good for democracy or this is a threat to democracy, etc., etc. So for me, just questioning that principle through the lens of Bitcoin was taking time. It's still taking time, but I think that's the most basic thing you realize once you realize that obviously democracy is not allowing us to legislate the central bank away, because that's never been the precedent in any country. No country has been able to do that. Javier Milei is the first leader who is talking about it. I doubt El Salvador does it. El Salvador talks about abolishing the central bank, but I think democratic elections have told us that no politician has been able to do that successfully, or at least even bring that into public discourse. Other than Ron Paul, is what my understanding is, that there's no mainstream politician who has done that.
Are you
Yeah,
telling me Donald Trump is not a Bitcoin maximalist?
yeah, yeah. That's one news that I have not been able to understand, because I know
He's
that he was.
a he has launched a new coin. He's a maxi
Yeah,
of his own coin, Trump coin.
yeah, yep. And this, so yeah, even in most advanced.
I just now in the evening I read it on the internet that he will apply sanctions on countries that want to move away from the dollar standard. Like countries that don't accept that don't trade in US dollars, that don't settle international trade in US dollars. He's planning to apply sanctions on them to retain the monopoly of US dollar as the global reserve currency. So like all the hopes that some people had are now down the drains.
Yeah, yeah, I
I
read
think
that
Trump
too.
said this,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
today he is. Yeah, today he has said that he'll just apply sanctions on whoever doesn't accept USD as a reserve currency. Then what's the point in him? What's the point in people bringing him in, claiming that they have brought Trump into Bitcoin scam and all?
I mean, he just wanted votes of Bitcoiners, who as many Bitcoiners as he can fool. And the people who invited him just got a lot of publicity. They got a lot of coverage. They became famous. So it was like a
Yeah. I think it was Alex. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Alex was there this year, and he shared a picture as well that Trump was definitely the highlight of Bitcoin Miami this year, which is, yeah, like you said, I think it's just trying to fool Bitcoiners. And I think this is the number one lesson of Bitcoin, that we have to be adversarial in our thinking. So, yeah, Trump attempting to do that is less of a problem. Bitcoiners falling into that trap is a bigger problem.
right, correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like ETF. It's like people understand there's a market of Bitcoin and they are coming for it, but they're coming for it for their own gains. They're not coming for Bitcoin. They're coming because it will bring them something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I am yet to uncover the entire story of how BlackRock is also buying mining shares. So it's definitely, if you are somebody who thinks that the entire control over block template and BlackRock ETF coming together are a strategy to at least attack Bitcoin. I personally don't think that the filtering of transactions is an attack, because currently the fees has already gone below, and the natural incentive mechanism of Bitcoin to just to have a natural fee incentive mechanism. If you can pay the fee, you can use Bitcoin. Then nothing can stop that. I don't know if that is part of the picture, but I think the BlackRock buying mining shares in the largest mining pools, who are already controlling more than 50% of hash rate combined, is definitely an attack on Bitcoin.
I think in other ways you can see that like if you are a miner and if anyone is a miner and is selling those bitcoins, the other person will price in 30% taxes, right? So They will price in when buying those bitcoins from a miner. Whereas if the miner keeps it to themselves and keeps it for the owner, like when a miner keeps it for themselves, they basically keep it for the owner. So if someone has 100% stake in the company, they keep it for that owner. And if that owner happens to be BlackRock, BlackRock's equity will only be taxed at equity tax rates, which might be 10 to 20%. So in a way, by owning miner share, they are decreasing the flow of Bitcoin that will come to public pool for purchase or for transactions.
Yep, yep. Yeah, thank you for sharing your points, Faisal and Saurav. Yep, I'll go ahead now. But yeah, as always, if you have anything more to add or questions, you can unmute yourself and ask. One of the most significant criticisms of democracy. Wait, I did not read this. Democracy, often hailed as the epitome of fair governance, is a system where the majority's decision through free and fair elections supposedly determines the political direction of the jurisdiction. Despite their widespread adoption and alleged inherent value in promoting freedom and equality, democratic systems are fundamentally flawed for several reasons. I'll just read this again because, like I said before, democracy for me and for a lot of people is has been the core principle of a free society. So it's important that we understand what it means and how it works. Yeah, so it's often hailed as the epitome of fair governance. It's a system where the majority's decision through free and fair elections supposedly determines the political direction of the jurisdiction. Despite their widespread adoption and alleged inherent value in promoting freedom and equality, democratic systems are fundamentally flawed for several reasons. One of the more significant criticisms of democracy is the tyranny of the majority. This tyranny occurs when the majority's interests consistently prevail at the expense of minority rights and interests. The majority often enforce policies that are detrimental to minority groups and individuals, leading to social divisions and injustice. Yeah, I think it's in the name itself, right? Democracy means rule of the 51%. So it's like the 51% attack. Sorry for the bad analogy, but I think it's already true that if you are able to secure the will of majority of population, that becomes the truth for most people to have to subscribe to. It's not an option for you to opt out of it anymore. So yeah, this is like a core tenet of democracy, nothing to do with central banking. It's true regardless of whether we live on Bitcoin standard and come up with a democratic system, because it will be always ruled by majority and not ruled by freedom or ruled by first principles of non-aggression. For me, I have come. I think for me, the first principle of human cooperation is the non-aggression principle. This book puts it the way that the only human right is the right to be left alone, because if all of us just follow that, then humans will naturally just interact with people that they find the most value in. So democracy, regardless of which monetary standard we are, will always remain the rule by majority governance system. Yeah. The majority often enforce policies that are detrimental to minority groups and individuals, leading to social divisions and injustice. Four people making a 4 out of 5 majority decision to beat up and steal from the fifth person is not particularly ethical. Yep, this is like the perfect example. So, like it said, that ethics and morality is a different layer of study and human behavior than law or polity, because clearly there are polities and legal systems which do not serve ethics and morality of human nature. Moreover, elected officials often prioritize policies with immediate benefits to secure re-election, neglecting long-term needs and sustainability. Yeah, this is like the incentive of elected officials to prioritize policies which win them votes, which win them immediate elections, and not invest in lower time preference infrastructure projects. That somebody who understands the value in creating value itself will realize that it's always best to have a lower time preference than to do something immediately or plan something just for the next 4 years. So yeah, democracy naturally, most democracies have 4 or 5 years of election time horizon, and that creates elected officials incentivizes elected officials to think only for the short term. This short term focus leads to inadequate investment and resource misallocation. Critical societal functions like infrastructure, education, and environmental protection require long term planning and commitment. Democracy seldom holds space for long term projects since the next election is always around the corner. Just look at the myopic shutdowns of several nuclear reactors in Europe, where appeasing confused climate alarmists resulted in the opposite effects of what those alarmists so stridently advocated for. Another example could be the Keystone XL pipeline project in Alberta, Canada, which was initiated, cancelled, reinstated, and then cancelled again because of the US election outcomes ping ponging between Team Blue and Team Red. Democracies struggle to make and implement tough decisions that are unpopular in the short term but beneficial in the long run. More often than not, the need for consensus or the fear of losing electoral support leads to gridlock on the avoidance of necessary reforms. Yeah, I'll just sum it up by just reiterating over this example of sometimes what happens is that the climate alarmists that advocate for certain policies end up having policies which have the opposite effect, because once the power or the authority makes those decisions, we have time for another elections, and you could have completely different ideological structure coming into power, and they will change the decisions overnight. So it completely dismantles the process of planning and pragmatism in decision making. One example, it's a bit unrelated, but I'll just share this with this group as well. So some people have also approached me asking that what your thoughts are on the Wazir X fiasco, and a lot of people claim that we should hold the CEO accountable, and we should put him in jail, etc., etc. My personal opinion on that is that the free market will never allow somebody like that to continue to function. So instead of asking him to put in jail, because that just asks more more compliance on companies, will eventually just have companies being compliant to government as a result. So you will always have companies catering to the government more than the customers, because they'll end up paying the cost of compliance over the cost of marketing, the cost of creating a better product, cost of serving better. That's the feedback completely disrupts, and yeah, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, because it allows you the option of just holding your keys, and you wouldn't have to run after somebody who holds your money, because you shouldn't be able to, or shouldn't need to give your power over money to someone else. But I'm just sharing my opinion on this. This is a bit unrelated, but I think it's important, because what this does is that it gives more power to short-term sighted leaders to make decisions on the behalf of a lot of people that might not subscribe to that. And that's why personal responsibility is the only antidote to any theft. It's like you have to be responsible with keeping your money where you keep them. Functioning democracies rely on an informed and engaged electorate. In other words, there are no functioning democracies. In most countries, citizens have one vote each, regardless of how informed they are about anything. Most voters lack sufficient knowledge to make informed decisions about almost anything, leading to choices based on superficial criteria or even blatant misinformation. Equality, in many ways, is the opposite of quality. Yep. I hope this is pretty self-explanatory, that it assumes that everybody has equal information or the right information, because it has given the power to each citizen to have the same power as every other citizen. So that's like the basic tenet of of human nature, that all of us are different, all of us are skilled in certain things, all of us are better in making judgments compared to someone who is not doing that for whatever reasons. So just assuming that everybody should have the power to make decisions because they are a citizen is also just fundamentally questionable. Yep. Democracies are also inherently susceptible to populism and demagoguery, where leaders gain support by appealing to popular desires and prejudices rather than using rational arguments. In fact, an election is nothing but a popularity contest. Populists always win, even if they claim to be nothing of the kind. Democratically elected leaders seldom have the best qualifications or intentions for the country's governance, because such things have virtually nothing to do with the election process. It's a popularity contest. It's just voting people, not voting policies. And yeah, the biggest policy is, like I said before, non-aggression principle. That's the only policy that we need. And most politicians never talk about it. They never talk about leaving you alone. They talk about taxing some group higher. Furthermore,
Shreyans,
those with, yeah,
Uh, one thing that I wanted to discuss, like this is a meta thing, not completely related here, but whenever I hear about these ideas, which is this is how the world should be, like when I was younger, like I would buy into it completely, but now I completely reject it, and I just wanted to understand like what is the case with other folks in the group. Like mostly I approach from practicality, and I'm like government will always want to do things that wins them election, irrespective of whatever is the ideal thing to do. People will just not leave you alone. If they can put you in some sort of work, they will do that. Like you talked about non-violence, and but the thing is, like the reality is, people will be violent if it is beneficial to you, beneficial to them. Like when you are reading the material, like how much of you are able to stay with it and hold those ideas, even though like and that's not a good thing. Like when the author explains something, we should like just completely be there. Is what I wanted to understand, like how much of reality do you choose to be in and how much of an idealist do you continue to be, because I believe
right.
that for someone building like something like Bitcoin, they have to be an idealist. Like they cannot just imagine the world as it is, and they cannot just take it for what it is. They have to believe that this is how the world should be, and that's when you start building towards it.
Right, right. That's a very, very articulate question, and I just have to give it to you for also just reminding that this is important for somebody to be in reality and not be an idealist, because as you said, reality works the way it is working, and people will put you to work if they can violently, simply said. So I think my understanding from that is that Bitcoin is permissionless, and I've been trying to press down this with other Bitcoiners and with myself and with people around me more and more. That Bitcoin is permissionless. Um, you don't need somebody. It's like you just go ahead and use it. And for you to be able to do that, you have to be responsible for being free enough to be able to do that. If somebody comes in the way, you have to take charge and get that person out of the way. That's the only way you can have a world where I'm able to be left alone, because people will try to get in the way, people will try to
Sovereign.
enforce behavior. Sorry.
You basically are talking about a world wherein people are sovereign.
Right, right, yes, yes. And I think it's a controversial subject, of course. I think a lot of the ideas we are discussing in the last couple of sessions are definitely very controversial. I think sovereigns, currently there are 194 sovereign countries, right? And anybody attempting to be sovereign is competing in that league, right? It's like if you're trying to compete in that league, you have to know that you are saying that, hey, I am also sovereign. So that sovereign will not like that. Or at least if they do not like that, they will at least attempt to demean or take away that sovereignty from you. So only you are responsible, because if you want to play that game, go ahead, play that game. Nobody can stop you from wanting to play that game, but you have to understand that game. And that's why I think for me, I'll just my experience has been that there is a difference between being brave and stupid. I have been stupid, and now I don't want to be stupid. I want to be continue to be brave, but I don't want to be stupid, because I don't think I want to challenge somebody's sovereignty. I want to be sovereign just by my actions, and that's working for me so far. I'm free to run a node. I'm free to access Bitcoin. I'm free to accept conversations with people who want to talk about Bitcoin or anything else. So I think this is the only way I'm looking at it. And I think one point on how you said that somebody has to be an idealist to use or understand or make Bitcoin. I don't know if I agree, because I think just deriving that principle from entrepreneurship from Austrian economics, that we anticipate value. It's anticipation, not being ideological. We anticipate that people will use Bitcoin. That's why we buy Bitcoin, or Satoshi created Bitcoin, that people will use this piece of technology. So I don't think it requires idealism, because I don't know honestly, because it's a tough question, but I think it requires pragmatism. If you are so Bitcoin did not exist before 2009, and it couldn't have existed maybe before 1980, 1950, when we did not have computers and internet. So before that time it was not possible, but after 2009 it is possible. And um, yeah, you can do that without being idealist. You can do that just for the reason of it adding value to you. Yeah, those are just my takes.
Thanks, Dan. Very articulate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Satyajit himself.
Bala, we could hear you.
Yeah, Satoshi himself was very much a a practical person rather than being an ideal person. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the quote also summarizes it, right? That Satoshi did not feel like he's a good educator of Bitcoin because he says that it's bloody hard to find words to explain this. And the other quote is that if you don't understand it, I don't have the time to explain it to you. So I think he admitted that even if he's an idealist, he does not want to be the idealist in public, or at least articulate Bitcoin for the masses, because he, I think, just anticipated that enough people will use it instead of wanting it to be used by majority of people. But yeah, but this is a, like I said, this is a tough question, and I think it's the most pressing question, at least for me, because I'm trying to understand. Like you said, that it's we have to be in reality. We have to stick to these ideas and be able to implement them in reality instead of just understanding how the world should be, because the world isn't how it should be. The world is how it is. Yeah, I'll continue reading. I was here. I'll just read this line again. Democratically elected leaders seldom have the best qualifications or intentions for the country's governance because such things have virtually nothing to do with the election process. Furthermore, those with substantial financial resources significantly influence the democratic process. Campaign financing, lobbying, and political advertising sway public opinion and policy decisions, and often prioritizing corporate interests and pet projects over people's actual needs. Yeah, this is like the understanding the economic principles again. Very, very simple idea that if you have control, if you have a honeypot, you will be incentivized to act in your own benefit and for people who are able to finance you. So yeah, this is where substantial financial resources will always sway the conversation, will always sway the process of democracy. And those words that are used, more politically correct words, are corporate campaign financing, lobbying, and political advertising. Voters generally vote for parties willing to spend government funds on them, whether this is through subsidizing the sector they work in or straight up government funding, doesn't matter. The average voter is not very likely to cast a vote that bites the hand that feeds him. In the so called public sector, no one wants a smaller government. Furthermore, if you're unemployed and in a social welfare program, you're even more likely to vote for parties that would unplug you're even more unlikely to vote for parties that would unplug your financial life support. The larger the government grows, the more people become dependent on it, and the less likely they are to reduce its size via the ballot box. Yeah, this is the realization that is helping me understand that Bitcoin is the only solution, that um, fighting reality through the democratic process has become a monumental task. And more power to somebody who can do that, who wants to do that. I think education is a free market activity. I don't look at it as a democratic activity. It's not telling people to vote better. It's telling people to be better. So I think, yeah, for me, this was the point where I realized that working within the democratic process will not help us come to the Bitcoin standard, and I'm still articulating and understanding how that works. But I think for now, it's only education. It's only helping more individuals understand Bitcoin better and practicing Bitcoin daily for ourselves, and not expecting everybody to be like us and yeah, have their own journeys. Politicians have lives outside of politics too. Most of them have families and they all have dreams and personal goals. They might have entered politics because of their passion for a specific cause at a young age, but that initial spark tends to fade as they grow older. As they mature, politicians start caring more for their families and less about what got them into politics in the first place. To rise within the party and become a successful politician, you must tuck away your strong personal opinions and align with the party groupthink. Yeah, this is the dynamics of any human group. So this is where the failure of politics, at least in democracy, as we've been studying this in this book, comes into picture. That eventually, no matter how ethical a person you vote into power, he will have his personal goals. He will have his family and his friends that he will always be biased towards.
To that point, I mean, I just wanted to mention a point that a lot of like my family members are into that. You know, should people should be trying for civil services and all that. And I always felt that like people get into civil services with all kinds of intention, but eventually they don't do anything meaningful. It's so much better just to run an enterprise, run a small startup, and do something valuable than trying to get into civil services or do a government job. And like when I went for network state, there was a similar idea, which was all these people who had come up there. I saw that recurrent theme that it's impossible to change the government or change how big countries work. The only option is you go and the only options are city states, right? You have Dubai, you have Singapore, you have Hong Kong, you have a couple of them. Those are only things that Shenzhen that sort of inspire a nation and inspires them because they have seen it work like far more effectively. It inspires other people, other countries to bring those systems. Like for example, bring those metros in, underground metros, and bring SEZs in, bring a certain kind of tax breaks in a certain geography like Gift City. Right, the inspiration has to come from something like that, and again, like you have Bitcoin, and so that also gives you an exit from the current system. Otherwise, you were completely tied into this. All your assets were there in real estate. All your money was in bank. All your friends and family were the ones who lived in your geographical vicinity. And Bitcoin and internet sort of frees you up from depending upon all of that.
Right, right. Yeah, again, perfectly summarized. I think I personally like the idea of city states a lot. I don't think that way that state itself is bad. I think smaller state is the way to go, at least for the short term. Anarchy is the long-term vision that everybody understands the principles of non-aggression principle on their own. This is my understanding of anarchy, and I think city states are effective because I don't know enough about Singapore and Dubai, but I know that they are reasonable examples of how city states have been effective. And yeah, I think that's at least to me the smallest unit of governance that can work. Yeah. Okay, we have reached the 9 mark. We'll read for 5 minutes more because we started 15 minutes into the session, and I'll not hold uh, a lot of you for a lot of time, but I'll just read for the next 5 minutes. The parties themselves are also under the influence of incentives. When a political party is founded, it's usually because impassioned founding members bond over a set of core principles. However, as the party grows, it becomes challenging to stick to the Genesis principles as more and more party members' individuals' opinions must be blended into the movement. The party is a democracy in itself and comes with the same set of challenges all democracies do. Right. If a political party is going to win an election or at least get as many votes as possible, it must throw its principles out the window. The most successful parties shape their campaigns based on whatever they think the majority thinks. Elections are not about which party best represents the most distinct political philosophy, nor is it about whoever best explains why their ideology is better than everyone else's. The winning party is the one that molds its message around whatever direction the electoral school of fish is swimming in right around election day. All political parties are therefore inherently populist, all of them. A democratic election is nothing but a popularity contest. This has been mentioned before as well, so I'll not explain this. For a political party to stay in power, it must uphold the facade of progress. The most efficient way to do so is to take on more national debt and spend frivolously on grandiose structures and reforms no one asked for. Nations rarely intend to repay their mounting debt. Rather, they accumulate more to keep pace with their rivals. Nations rarely intend to repay their mounting debt, rather, they accumulate more to keep pace with their rivals. A government's default option to reduce this burden is to embark on the economically destructive path of printing more fiat currency. The temptation to overspend while deferring cost proves irresistible. Remember, the only way a government can extract value from its subjects is to take it by force. Yep, yep. I'll read this once before and then I'll summarize the last few passages. I'll not cover anything per passage. Governments invoke three ways to take your stuff against your will. The first and most obvious way is to tax you, and governments don't want it to be too evident that taking your stuff is what they're doing. Therefore, they tend to tax things you are less likely to notice. Corporate taxes, import tariffs, sales taxes, and other taxes ultimately punish you, the consumer. Another thing governments do to keep up the facade that taxes are fair and legitimate is to make people in the public sector pay them too. Why? Taxes pay public sector employees, so why go through the bothersome process of paying them too much and making them pay back parts of their salaries? The only reason wait, I'll read this again. So yeah, taxes are fair and legitimate, and how they do it is by making people in the public sector pay them too. Why? Taxes pay public sector employees, so why go through the bothersome process of paying them too much and making them pay back parts of their salaries? The only reason for this is to deceive you into thinking that the public sector is just as much a part of nation's economy as the private one. It isn't. So I think I'll actually close this session by covering just the summary of the last couple of paragraphs. And I think the one key takeaway is that this helps you realize that the government is able to do this only because they use ideas, they use deception to do this. Because it's, if you focus on the passages here, and yeah, of course, this book is not the Bible or some holy text, so it's not as if we stick to the word of it, but I think it also reiterates over that they do this and they prioritize making it not too evident. So it's working more through deception than violence, because it is helping. It is, its priority is to not let people realize that this is happening. Because like I said before, most people every day understand consent. Everybody does. Every human without doubt understands consent because you just observe it every day, and that's the only way to know it. You personally can know that you value consent, and you can observe your people around you. So government prioritizes that they do any policies which are not working for you, not working for the market process, by not making it too evident. So yeah, this is one key takeaway for me. And yeah, like I said before, that yeah, political parties, they have convoluted incentives because they start with a small group of people aligning on core principles, but they will eventually have um, friendly people. They will have families to take care of. The popular metaphor is that nepotism is a problem only until it does not work for you. So that's the reality of how humans operate. So any political party can never be expected to provide solutions for you. It's just you that has to do it. And yeah, that's just one rambling one that I wanted to share. I'll close this session. I think it's. I also personally have to take dinner and leave in a while. So we'll close up this session. Thank you for sticking around, and we'll close.